Good morning. It's Veterans Day 2024. And first, I would like to express a heartfelt thanks to all veterans in the United States who have been sent into combat on behalf of our nation, or supposedly so. I know it takes a great deal of dedication and love of our republic to do that, to risk your life in that way. I also want to congratulate the American people for voting to reject Dick and Liz Cheney and their candidate Kamala Harris, who is more of a stooge for the old British Empire than an American patriot who would act to keep our veterans out of harm's way. And therefore, I want to also thank President-elect Donald Trump for his pledge to end the forever wars, which I must insist have to include wars in Southwest Asia, particularly the continuing to aid Israel, the current regime in Israel, and their genocidal aggression against the population of Gaza, the West Bank, southern Lebanon, and I'm hoping that there will be an end to this slaughter. Now, let me show you a few reasons for hope from the incoming administration, the latest of which maybe some of you saw, but I think is extremely important. This is a post from President-elect Donald J. Trump, I think from Truth Social. He also posted this on X. I will not be inviting former Ambassador Nikki Haley or former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to join the Trump administration, which is currently in formation. I very much enjoyed and appreciated working with them previously and would like to thank them for their service to our country. Make America great again. Well, that is certainly music to my ears. Mike Pompeo was the former CIA director who said they lie, cheat, steal, and who also advocated the assassination of Julian Assange. So it looks like Trump may have learned something from some of the mistakes of his previous administration. Nikki Haley, a similar warmonger, very nasty character. I'm hoping that people like Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy Jr. are playing a role in ensuring that some of the worst warmongering neocons do not become members of the incoming Trump administration. And for veterans, we have to end the policy of abuse of Americans' veterans. You have been sent into so many wars based on lies, which have not done a thing to make America safer, but have put us in harm's way, put you in harm's way, and led to the death of thousands, tens of thousands, of hundreds of thousands of people who did not need to die. And I'm thinking of Vietnam, Iraq, the first one and the second Iraq War, Afghanistan, frankly, and other military operations which are not even discussed or mentioned. This has to stop. And a great part of stopping it will be if we have freedom of speech in this country, so these false narratives can be exposed. And this was the other message from President-elect Donald Trump and President Donald Trump that also I think is very promising, and I hope will be circulated, and we will see to it that he delivers on this, and I will show you this. Here is my plan. He's talking about the freedom of speech and the defense of freedom of speech. First, within hours of my inauguration, I will sign an executive order banning any federal department or agency from colluding with any organization, business, or person to censor, limit, categorize, or impede the lawful speech of American citizens. I will then ban federal money from being used to label domestic speech as mis- or disinformation, and I will begin the process of identifying and firing every federal bureaucrat who has engaged in domestic censorship directly or indirectly, whether they are the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Health and Human Services, the FBI, the DOJ, no matter who they are. Excellent. This is excellent news. Uh, Very important because so many of these wars might have been avoided had freedom of speech not been suppressed. I'm sure we would have stopped sending weapons to Ukraine long ago had Americans been allowed to talk about the uh, NAZI affiliation and connection of parts of the Ukrainian military, like the Azov battalion. And I'm sure that similarly, we would have gone much farther in stopping the genocide in Gaza if people were allowed to speak about that. And I hope freedom of speech extends to students at places like Columbia University. Now, what I want to share with you is a message from Lyndon LaRouche, which I think is very timely and very appropriate for Americans to consider, both in light of the strategic situation today and the fact that we are quickly coming into the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution and the founding of our republic. This is from a paper by LaRouche, February 9th, 2004, The New Turning Point in World History. We have now come to the end of that empire, the British Empire, which has reigned, whether more richly or more poorly on this planet, for 1/4 of a millennium. Every nook and cranny of the world, every field and hamlet of the United States included, will be shaken by the presently onrushing effects of the currently onrushing final fall of that colossus. Think of the bubble of derivatives obligations held in the City of London. Perhaps the whole empire did not come crashing down in 2004, but 20 years later today, it absolutely is. That's what the advent of the BRICS nations and BRICS Plus, the world is rejecting colonialism and colonial methods, and Americans should get used to it and go back to our founding principles. Later in the paper, he writes, there are only two alternatives before the USA for the short time still ahead. Either we shall resume the pathway charted by President Franklin Roosevelt's recovery from the deep depression brought upon us by Presidents Coolidge's and Hoover's administrations, or the prolonged attempt to maintain the continuity of the presently hopelessly bankrupt floating exchange rate monetary financial system will plunge the planet as a whole, chain reaction style, into a prolonged new dark age in which the world's population would probably fall to a miserable number less than 1 billion from the more than 6 billions today, 8 billions reported today. No hysteric, screaming denial of that consequence would prevent such a calamity from erupting at this time. For today's world at large, this inevitable collapse of that empire in that form poses a challenge we dare not evade. We must choose whether we will go virtually to a living hell throughout this planet in the fall of this imperial world system, or whether we shall call forth the legacy of the 1776 through 1789 American Revolution to bring forth on this planet the kind of community among respectively sovereign nation states which our John Quincy Adams affirmed and which the present circumstance urgently requires. That latter task defines the pivotal, crucial historical mission confronting the next president of the USA. Well, that is certainly the case today. This is what we hope that President Donald Trump will do in his plans to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, is to return to the principles of John Quincy Adams and George Washington, which is not one of isolation, but was one of respect for the sovereignty of other nations and the commitment to do good.